Good morning. My name is Pearl Coupe, and I'm representing three organizations, Christian Leaders Forum. I'm also representing Time to Rise, and I'm also representing the Deborah's 972. And I'd also like to thank you for the opportunity to present. And I'd like to say from the outset, I'm very optimistic that our submissions will be taken in. The reason why I'm saying that is because we've been making submissions for over 15 years. On hate speech bill, Papuda bill. On the hate speech bill, we made over 120,000 submissions. When the bill came back after public consultation, we realized that none of our submissions were actually considered. In fact, the bill came back worse than what we had proposed. So I'm just saying we're hoping, we're very optimistic that the submissions that will be made today will be taken into account, cognizance of, and will be also actually utilized. The first instance I wanted to say that the first submission we would make is the failure of the Act to protect religious freedom. And of course, I'm referring to Section 15 of the Constitution, which protects the freedom of not only religion, but also belief and opinion. And in saying that, we would say that it does not protect the religious freedom of civil marriage officers who may be required to perform marriages that go against their religious beliefs. And I've already referred to Section 15, which recognizes religion, belief, and conscience as equality rights. And this means that discrimination that is based on any of these grounds is deemed automatically unfair, i.e. unlawful. And so the bill fails to protect the religious freedom of civil marriage officers, and this includes employees of Department of Home Affairs and magistrates. They cannot refuse to solemnize a marriage based on their sincerely held religious beliefs. I also would like to just point out on the issue of the bill, the issue, I noted you were happy that there were females and that we maybe also make submissions on the issue of polyandry. And while I'm not here to defend polyandry, I would like to raise it as an issue to counter the inclusion of polygamy, So the bill in allowing men or man to take second wife weakens the defense of religious freedom. And as we've said, state marriage officers who would refuse to solemnize same-sex marriage could lose their jobs. Now, when the marriage bill, which allows men to take more wives, with the consent, and I say consent in quotes, that's Section 6, I believe, subsection 2, subsection A, with the consent, in quotes, of his existing wife. Also like to point out that culturally, and the reality that's on the ground, is that women are actually often in a very weak position to negotiate. So that aspect of consent, it's just, it's a formality, but it really is not something that most women would be empowered to do in practice and in reality. The inclusion of polygamy, I would also like to say, I believe also opens a can of worms. And as we've heard, in fact mentioned by you, Chairperson, that there are already groups who are advocating for the inclusion of polyandry, and on the basis that their rights allegedly are being infringed, and that there's an issue of discrimination. And we know, of course, that discrimination is prohibited insofar as the Constitution is concerned, unless, of course, there's an exclusionary aspect to it. So we are just saying it is best to shut the door on multiple marriages. Why? Because it opens up a can of worms. How are you going to address the issue of polyandry? And it doesn't stop there. and multiple marriages set up, coexisting. As we've already heard, there are already submissions beyond polyandry, that other proposals are being made even now. I would also like to say that overall, it is our submission that the bill is too liberal in nature. It is too liberal. It is opening up the nation to a lot of issues. Where do we stop is the question. It's being alleged that the bill's aim is to provide equity. Where does the buck stop? In some issues, we've allowed people to identify with other genders, and people now are identifying with all sorts of things. Where does the boundary end when it becomes so liberal? We have Section 22(6), for instance, which rightfully criminalizes marriage between people who are related to one another by blood or by adoption. So the question we need to ask ourselves sincerely is, how can we be sure that by removing all these boundaries in marriage, it will not open door to people also who are related to blood, who will say, we are also being discriminated against. As a brother and a sister, we also want to get married because we are also discriminated against. So the door is being opened to a whole host of potential discriminatory cases that may be brought. And we are saying, please, there needs to be a place where boundaries, there's a cutoff limit. There's a cutoff limit. Discrimination, going back to the issue of marriage officers who may potentially lose their jobs. We have seen wedding venue owners who may lose their businesses, who are being sued because they refused to marry people of same-sex orientation, which was contrary to their religious beliefs. The protection that is being afforded to the pastors, Section 11, subsection 4, is really very minimal. It's very minimal. And pastors are, in fact, better protected by the current separate laws as opposed to the amalgamation of all the laws. And we will say that this is weakening the defense of religious freedom. In conclusion, I would just like to say that the proposed Marriage Act also really is driving towards the restructuring of the family. It is restructuring the family, and while we agree it is important to recognize rights, we would also say it's important to also protect the family institution. As African people, we are pro-African. We believe in Ubuntu, we are family-oriented, we believe in the extended family. And the act, in terms of the way it is currently being implemented, is now positively contributing to the dissolution and the disintegration of the family. And while the state must recognize, yes, different moralities, the rights of children must be preeminent. The rights of children must be preeminent. What research has shown that what is best for children and in the protection of children's rights is that children will thrive in environments where they have their fathers and mothers in a home together. And these children have the best outcomes in education, as well as the social aspects of the development of personality. We live in a nation that struggles with fatherlessness. We must look at the issues that we are struggling with and not seek to align ourselves with values that go against our own traditional values. So that in essence is the summary of our submissions, to say, let us make sure that in trying to be liberal, let us make sure that we do not omit putting in boundaries. Let's not let the door keep getting wider and wider while we end up being an entirely immoral and lawless nation that has no morals or boundaries. And I will end just by saying, since I'm here representing the Christian community, to say that righteousness exalts a nation and sin is a reproach. A nation without morals is a nation that cannot progress or prosper, I think.